Good morning, everyone. Today I'm pleased to present the Government of Alberta's 2024-2025 first quarter fiscal update and economic statement. Earlier this year, when our government presented Budget 2024, we forecast a modest $351 million surplus. Today, our first quarter report shows a $2.6 billion increase in that projection, with a forecast surplus of $2.9 billion for this fiscal year. We've benefited from higher oil prices, a narrower light-heavy differential as the TMX pipeline is getting our oil to the coast and out to the global market. But while our surplus may be higher than we estimated at budget, that is an accounting surplus. What's the difference between that and a cash surplus? Well, there are streams of government revenue that aren't accessible for operational spending. This includes things such as university tuition, which is collected by our post-secondaries to fund their operations. Another example is the income from the Heritage Fund, most of which was previously deposited in general revenue. Under our new fiscal framework, all of the income is left to the fund to continue to grow and generate prosperity for Albertans in the future. After adjustments and calculations, we forecast we will be left with no surplus cash at the end of 24-25 and are in fact forecasting to take on additional borrowing. And that means we must be even more measured and responsible when making budgetary decisions. We must make sure funding can be sustained as we grow so that we can keep communities safe during wildfires and other natural disasters, so that we can invest in the programs and services Albertans rely on, and so that our kids and grandkids also experience the Alberta Advantage in the future. We can't spend beyond our means today. We must manage debt and save for a better tomorrow, which will help us continue to provide Albertans the services and programs they need, as well as act as responsible stewards of your hard-earned tax dollars. This is vital to keep Alberta's economy strong and public services sustainable. This year's budget contains the largest ever health and education spending in Alberta history. We are well positioned to be the economic engine of Canada. Energy continues to fuel that engine, with the TMX adding capacity and supporting growth in production, investment, and exports. We've upped our forecast for West Texas Intermediate to $76.50 US per barrel this fiscal year and are getting more for our crude. Industrial investment is solid, with a number of big projects now underway, including Dow Chemical, McCain's potato processing plant, Air Products Hydrogen Complex, and Imperial Oil's renewable diesel facility. We anticipate our population to grow at a record pace of 4.6% in 2024, up significantly from budget and also higher than last year. Our population is seeing strong growth, but as I've said before, this growth brings challenges we must be prepared to face. We need to make our provincial budget work for everyone, to make sure public services meet the needs of our growing population. We must help Albertans and communities affected by ongoing drought conditions, wildfires, and other emergencies. Collective bargaining negotiations are underway with thousands of public sector workers, including teachers and nurses, and we've promised to cut personal income taxes to save Albertans $1.4 billion each year. More on that in a moment. This is why strong fiscal management is so important, so that we can continue to deliver top quality public programs and services now and in the future without breaking the bank. Our first quarter fiscal results show a responsible path forward. Our revenue forecast for 24-25 has increased to $76.2 billion, a $2.7 billion improvement driven by personal income taxes and non-renewable resource revenue. Population and employment gains have driven up personal income tax revenue by $458 million from budget, and resource revenue is up $2.5 billion from budget to $19.8 billion because of higher than expected oil prices. Our resource revenues are also benefiting from a steady narrowing of the light-heavy differential as our heavy crude gains access to global markets now that the TMX pipeline is online. A $1 change in the light-heavy differential can impact Alberta's budget by upwards of $600 million. The light-heavy differential forecast dropped to $14.40 this quarter compared to $16 at budget. That alone equates to almost $1 billion more. This is all positive for the Alberta economy, But we can't just depend on volatile oil prices to balance the budget. We must make careful spending choices that ensure our economy remains strong. Our expense forecast has remained relatively stable at first quarter. Expense for the year is now forecast at $73.3 billion, an increase of $101 million from budget, offset by dedicated revenue. As of mid-August, we've committed $573 million to disaster and emergency response. This includes wildfire fighting costs, emergency evacuation payments, and matching donations made to the Canadian Red Cross. We also committed $125 million more to help schools with enrollment growth and inflation pressures. And capital dollars are up as projects delayed from last year are scheduled to move forward. As a result, we have $1.4 billion left in our contingency. Our fiscal rules limit in-year spending increases to the contingency with some exceptions. I'm pleased the surplus has driven down our debt servicing costs from budget. We remain steadfast in our promise to strengthen the healthcare system and provide access to top quality education. And we're working on bringing in the personal income tax cut, hopefully by the next budget, so Albertans can keep more in their pockets each year. Right now, we're working hard on the budget to make that possible, and we'll have in the coming weeks. We will continue to protect communities and families facing wildfires and emergencies, and we will chart a path to grow our Heritage Fund into a legacy that will support the economy and Alberta. I'll be the first to say this won't be easy. With a responsible plan, we can keep our economy resilient and make sure the next generations don't carry the burden of today. Our engine can keep humming and Albertans can continue to reap the benefits. Thank you. I'd be happy to take questions.
Sorry. Thank you, everyone. We're going to move to our Q&A right now. We're going to start in the room, and then we're going to move to the phones. As you ask your questions, please identify your name and your outlet, who you're with, and we'll go with one question, one follow-up. Go ahead, Carrie.
Carrie Tate with the Globe and Mail. Excuse my cough, Minister. You attended hockey games with MH Care, Sam Marish. I'm wondering which games you went to and how many.
I did attend two Oilers games with MH Care. I went to a game in the first round and a game in the third. I don't have the exact dates on me, but it was all within the rules and will be disclosed on my Ethics Commissioner statement.
You have a follow-up?
Yep, thank you. Thank you very much for answering that, Minister. It's been tricky getting ministers to answer that question. We can't get answers out of the Premier's office. It will never be public what games staff went to under the current rules. Do you think that the current rules need to be revised?
The rules were just revised. I can't speculate on.
But do you believe the current version of these rules is adequate? Now that we've, in retrospect, after the past couple months and seeing the resistance from this government to disclose who went to games and who hosted, do you think that the rules are serving Albertans?
Does this feel like resistance?
Yes, I've been trying to get a hold of you for 2 months. You hung up on me once, Minister. I've been trying to get a hold of you. I've been emailing you. We've reached out repeatedly to the Premier's office without answer. Do you believe, are you comfortable with the current version of these rules guarding your conflicts of interest?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Carrie. Next question. Michelle.
Minister, following up on that, what members of your staff attended those games?
None that I'm aware of.
Can you tell us at those games, were there staff members in the Premier's office? Like, who was there besides you?
I can't comment, folks. I know, as the Premier said, every minister is responsible for themselves, and they have to make sure that they're disclosing through the Ethics Commissioner, which I have done and will do. And
why can't you? If you guys did nothing wrong, then why can't you tell us?
Did do nothing wrong. That's why I just told you.
No, but we're asking you. Who else was there at those games? And then you're telling us that it's up to individual ministers to tell us that. If you did nothing wrong, and if these guys did nothing wrong, I think that we would be hearing more about this. So can you tell us who was in the room with you? Who was in that box with you at those games?
I can only speak for myself, Ms. Bellefontaine. I was invited to go to the game, went, cheered on the Oilers, and it'll be on my ethics disclosure.
Thank you. Next question. Go ahead.
Hi, Sean Amato, City News. The Premier has indicated that the Alberta Sheriffs are to have a larger role in policing, perhaps becoming the provincial police force. As a senior cabinet member, what do you think about that?
Well, I think, Public Safety Minister has made clear that he thinks the sheriffs can play a bigger role. I think they see them as filling gaps that exist on the landscape currently. What that becomes, I think it's kind of a wait and see. I have many rural communities that are served by the RCMP, but there's certainly gaps. I think we hear that. We hear that from municipalities that have taken the minister up on his grant to explore what their needs are. So I think it'll organically maybe show us that there's gaps that need to be filled, but no decisions have been made that I'm aware of.
You have a follow-up, Sean?
Yeah, so a report for government found that it's going to cost a lot more money to go with an Alberta Provincial Police over the RCMP. What impact will going with the sheriffs have on our budget? And if it does cost more, why is that valuable for Albertans?
I'd have to see that it would. I know right now we have a large contract. It is our authority that's delegated through the RCMP contract, but I know they're having a hard time and there's a shortage of officers on the ground. So I think you'd really need to see an apples to apples comparison to make that claim.
One more on the floor and we'll go to the phones. Go ahead, Lisa.
Hey, Lisa Johnson, Canadian Press. Minister, you said you're happy with the conflict of interest rules as they are. You think they're adequate. Can you explain to Albertans why you think staff members should be able to accept gifts, including potentially from somebody who's involved with government contracts, multi-million-dollar government contracts? Why should those not be disclosed, those gifts disclosed to Albertans?
Well, I would just say I think the Premier, some of the motivation behind changing it was so that she could be staffed at events. Because under the prior iteration of the rules, she had a hard time actually getting into events and being staffed. It wouldn't be reasonable for her to attend an event where she couldn't have staff with her. So that was some of the motivation to change the rules. I hope that answers your question.
Well, if it's perfectly reasonable for staff to attend with ministers and with the Premier to these events, if it's important that you guys attend these events, why not just disclose? Why not disclose it? Like, that's the ultimate question that I don't understand why the reason, what the reasoning is behind not disclosing that. If there's nothing wrong with it, why not disclose it proactively?
Well, it's a conversation that I guess we're having here. If there's more changes that need to be made, I'm sure they'll take that into consideration.
Thank you. We'll go to the phones.
You're the senior cabinet
We'll come back
minister.
to the floor after some questions from the phone. Operator, can you please put through our first caller?
Sean Polzer with Western Standard. Hi. I was wondering if you could speak to revenues from the carbon tax, the industrial carbon tax, and the tier fund. How much is going into it, and how it's going to be affected going forward when some of these annual increases come into play?
It's complicated. I guess I would say we do know that our tier forecast has come down recently by about $180 million. It's probably a question that Energy Minister would answer better than me, but important to remember that this is something that they pay for compliance. So it's not a direct correlation to the changes you see here in revenues.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah. There was a note in the briefing this morning about the number of oil sands plants that are coming into full payout position. I believe there's 2 of them this year, 1 next year, and 1 the year after. What kind of impact does that have on the resource revenues in terms of the additional royalties that they're going to be paying?
It can make a dramatic impact. Yeah, I believe your numbers are correct. We have about two a year, maybe three in the out year, and we're at over 80% in full payout now. And that's why you've seen the sensitivity change as much as it has. We've gone from somewhere in the range of $250 million per dollar WTI to $630 million. So it's having that impact now, and that'll continue to grow.
Okay, we currently don't have any other in the queue. Go ahead, Shalane.
Thank you. We heard this morning that UTI averaged about $80 a barrel so far this year. Given that, when can Albertans expect any relief in gas prices? And then just adding on to that, on the weekend radio show, the Premier said that that would cut into her plan to deliver the personal income tax relief, which you mentioned would be coming in the budget. So basically, is the plan to abandon any gas tax relief so that you can push that personal income tax cut out sooner?
The gas tax relief will be there when the formula tells us it is, I guess. I know we've been through this in the past, but that is the average of the days in the first quarter. It's complicated, but you need 2 weeks to inform the retailers. That's why the formula is legislated as it is. So there's 20 trading days kind of in the middle of the quarter. So for this year, for example, you'd have July, August, and September. So we would be in the monitoring phase right now. And if it were to trigger over 80, the relief would be automatic.
And in terms of the $1.4 billion in the contingency fund, how much of that are you expecting to be wiped out in terms of the rebuild of Jasper?
One thing I know that will happen with Jasper is there will be a disaster recovery program. I know that's something that is common, and it's already through Treasury Board. I don't believe it's gone through Cabinet yet, but I know that will happen. There is federal dollars that come into play there. But when you talk about the contingency, there is a lot of pressures that we see. We invested in education here in first quarter. We know there's pressures in health and SCSS that will probably be dealt with at second quarter. So we're trying to keep our powder dry in the contingency to deal with the challenges throughout the year, but there are many, not just Jasper.
We'll take one more from the floor and a final question from the phones. Go ahead.
Graham Thompson with the Star today. I was going back to the, it changes from day to day. Going back to this idea of people getting freebie tickets from certain groups, why doesn't the government just pay for tickets? Like, if it's important to cheer the Oilers on, I'm not saying it's not important, but why not just pay for your ticket or have the government pay for a ticket to sit with the rest of us in the stands as opposed to going to a VIP suite and things like that?
Well, it's a consideration, I guess, Graham. Like I've never gone to a game like that before. I guess they've never been in the playoffs. But yeah.
Yeah, I understand you want to go there and cheer them on, but why not just pay for your ticket?
It's a fair point.
And in the future, you're going to pay for your own ticket, as opposed to having staff go there getting freebies from certain corporations or whatever. I understand the Premier has security issues, I understand that. But when it comes to the rest of you and staff, why not just pay for your tickets to go see a game? Or have the government at least pay for the tickets, as opposed to this apparent conflict of interest popping up?
Well, I certainly don't think the government should have to pay for anything out of taxpayers' dollars, but
And have staff, so go and have yourself or staff pay for the tickets.
well, it's a consideration that should be taken going forward.
Thank you,
If
Graham.
the
We'll take
government-
one final
if the
question from the phones.
If the government should,
Operator,
if the
please put
government
through our
should-
next caller.
If the government shouldn't be paying, why should they be taking free tickets?
I have a follow-up, right?
Okay, we'll come back to you at the very end.
Hey, you got me there?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to go back to the fiscal update for one question. I think I ask it every single fiscal update. When are we going to see a break for those Albertans who are struggling financially? I understand there are programs, but I want to talk specifically about the future. There's been talks of a tax break that's going to save Albertans. I believe it's $1.4 billion. When are we going to see relief for people who are still struggling with that inflation?
Well, I know the Premier's asked me to do what we can to accelerate the tax cut. So those conversations are being had, and they'll continue to be had as we build Budget 2025. I think what this shows, I just remind everyone, we're still in a borrowing position, but this improved position has improved our debt servicing by about $180 million from budget. That's dollars that can be, put to the programs that Albertans rely on today and in the future. So we have a robust amount of programming to help Albertans now and in the future. And by being prudent now, we can ensure that those programs remain now and in the future.
Tim, do you have a follow-up?
Let's go back to the tickets. I just want to know from you, Minister, do you think yourself or other people in your government need to be more forthcoming with Albertans? Do you think you owe it to Albertans to give further answers on this subject?
Well, I think the ethics commissioner works on behalf of Albertans. That's why we ensure that we're following all the rules, and we have a disclosure that we fill out annually with the ethics commissioner to ensure that we're, following the legislation and doing right on behalf of all Albertans. So I think that's the most important thing. If you think you're doing something wrong, you shouldn't do it. I certainly didn't, and that's why I'm happy to tell you here today.
Okay, and I do owe Graham a follow-up. I apologize, I jumped the gun. Go ahead, Graham, with the final question today.
There we go. But do you understand why people would look at this and think there's a conflict here? Do you understand why people are thinking, why not be more open? I know you're going to say you're following the rules, but do you, looking at this as a politician and how people perceive things, the optics of this, do you understand why the optics might not look good to people outside of the government?
Well, the optic that I care the most about, Graham, is about being honest to Albertans. I think this is a job that I require that. I want Albertans to know that, I'm forthcoming. And so I follow the rules with the ethics commissioner, answered your question here today. I don't know what more I can do.
Thanks, everyone. That concludes today.
Minister, can you explain why you're comfortable, or why government should not pay for tickets? I get that. But why it would be okay for politicians or staff to take freebies from companies that do business or would want to do business with the government? Why would that be okay?
Look, I know there's many events throughout the course of the year that I attend, with the media as well, where we're hosted by different groups. I take meetings every day with people that schedule through our office, and my calendar's FOIPable. I meet with everyone. So.
Well, when you were meeting with Sam Marish in his box, did you push him to get some sort of value out of the $80 million for the Tylenol that put children at risk? What did you do in that moment as finance minister?
I'm not going to comment about any private Alberta citizens. I'd never met the man before, and he offered the ticket, and I went.
Thanks. We're done. Let's go, Minister.